Everyone knows what this is, right? It's a compact disc. 5 inches of binary data. Digital information. Music reduced to a collection of zeros and ones. And for the last 20 years, this has been the storage medium of choice. The planet is lousy with them. But you remember what this is, right? It's an old-fashioned vinyl record. The planet is lousy with them, too. There were tens of billions of vinyl records out there. Back in the 80s, during the transition from vinyl to CD, a lot of those old records were digitized and reissued on compact disc. They started naturally with all the biggest and most important and most popular records, except with the Beatles. There was a problem with the Beatles, so they were kind of late to the party. Bottom line, though, is that by the late 1990s, all the worthy songs had been converted to CD and reissued on full albums or as compilations or box sets or whatever. So now we're in a totally digital world, right? Anything that we could possibly want is now available on compact disc. Well, not so fast. After spending half a century getting people to buy tens of billions of vinyl records, something must have been missed. Omissions, mistakes, legal problems that prevented any kind of digitizing. I can hear you saying, well, okay, yeah, but like what? Well, you'd be surprised at what's been missed. Here are some tales from the Vinyl Vault.
You're tuned to the ongoing history of new music.
Birds fly over the rainbow, why then oh why can't
Now, there is a prime example of a song that should have made it to compact disc, but as far as I know, it has never, ever happened. That's Toby Swan with his version of the Judy Garland classic, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Toby was the singer of an infamous Toronto punk band called the Battered Wives, who were around through the late 70s and early 80s. When they broke up after their second record, the drummer went off to form Blue Rodeo, believe it or not. Well, Toby went solo, releasing an album in 1981 called Lullabies in Razorland on an indie label operated by the El Macambo, the legendary scuzzy rock club on Spadina Avenue in Toronto. That's where you'll find Somewhere Over the Rainbow on this record. There was a second album called Imaginary Angels that was issued on cassette in 1986, also on the El Macambo label, and that was the last we heard from Toby. There were stories about him going down to Mexico in a bad car accident, but you know what? That's all I can tell you. And I still get people asking me about this version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and my answer is always the same. Sorry, the record's out of print, and to my knowledge, it has never been released on CD. Why? Not sure. Could be a variety of reasons. The master tapes disappeared or were damaged beyond repair. Legal reasons. Stuff like, who owns the copyright and who owed whom money. Or maybe no one thinks sales would justify the cost of such an effort. Maybe Toby just couldn't be bothered. Whatever the case, for many people, Lullabies in Razorland is one of those great lost vinyl records of the 1980s. Welcome to the show. I'm Alan Cross, and buried deep within the earth is a large room containing the Ongoing History archives. There are more than 20,000 CDs in the collection, and I swear to God, there's between 15 and 20,000 vinyl records dating back to the early 70s. It could be one of the greatest collections of alt-rock retro in the country, if not the world. I was looking for that Toby Swan record the other day, and it occurred to me how few of the records in this archive have actually made it to CD. Or if they have, those CDs are next to impossible to find. So that got me thinking, why not make a pile of some real vinyl records that don't seem to have been re-released on compact disc? And after an hour, I had this really substantial pile. And I've pulled out the best for this show. Then I had to find and rig up a turntable because all the turntables have been put in storage. If you're into retro big time, you're going to love this because you're going to hear things that you may not have heard for decades, complete with all the pops and crackles and even skips that characterize old-school vinyl records. This is authentic stuff. This is actual vinyl. I don't want anybody thinking that I cheated and just downloaded these songs. What you are about to hear is the original source material. Now, here's an example. In 1986, Peter Gabriel was flying high with the So album. You know the record. This is the one that featured Sledgehammer. In October 1986, he released a 12-inch single version of Big Time, another one of the hits off the album. The first track on the second side of that 12-inch was a special extended mix of In Your Eyes, another hit from that album. Not only is this version longer than the original, but it contains 8 extra lines of lyrics at the beginning and another 6 extra lines at the end. Plus, it features the vocal contributions of Youssou N'Dour, a singer from Senegal in Africa, and the whole thing was produced by Canadian and Hamilton boy Daniel Lanois. Now, if you were to ask me, this 12-inch version is far superior to the one that we're left with on CD today. And if it has ever been released on compact disc, I have never been able to find it. If you know where it is, please tell me because I want to go out and buy it. See if you agree that this is the superior version of this song. It's the long-lost, out-of-print version of Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes.
Accepting all I've done and said, I want to stand and stare again till there's nothing left out. Oh, it remains there in your eyes. Whatever comes and goes, I will hear your silent call, and I will touch this tender wall till I know I'm home again. I want to stand and stare again till there's nothing left out. Oh, it remains there in your eyes. Whatever comes and goes, oh, it's in your eyes.
Vinyl-only Peter Gabriel from 1986, the special mix of In Your Eyes. If you saw Gabriel in concert through the 80s and early 90s, you'll know that he tended to perform this song in the style of that 12-inch instead of the album or single version. Here's another example of a track that has somehow slipped through the digital cracks. Kraftwerk, one of the great electronic pioneers of all time. Their most productive years were back in the 70s, but even as they voluntarily withdrew from the public eye in the early 1980s, they continued to release groundbreaking electronic music. In 1983, they released a 12-inch single called Tour de France. All the guys in the band are big into cycling, you see, and one side featured all the lyrics in Kraftwerk's native German, and the other was the same thing except that it was sung in French. Great track, whatever the language. But no one has ever managed to release it on CD in its full and proper 12-inch version. Now, fortunately, there is a copy of said 12-inch in the Ongoing History archives. Let's hear the French version. This is long-lost Kraftwerk and Tour de France.
Côte d'Azur et Saint-Tropez, Tour de France, Tour de France, les Alpes et les Pyrénées, Tour de France, Tour de France, dernière étape Champs-Élysées, Tour de France, Tour de France. Pédaler en grand braquet, Tour de France, Tour de France, sprint final à l'arrivée, Tour de France, Tour de France. Crevaison sur les pavés, Tour de France, Tour de France. Le vélo vitre réparé, Tour de France, Tour de France. Le peloton est regroupé, Tour de France, Tour de France. Camarades et amitié, Tour de France, Tour de France.
Kraftwerk and the French version of Tour de France from 1983. Shortened versions were available in Germany, and I know of an edit that appeared on the soundtrack for a movie called Breakdance back in about 1984, and I've since been told that there was a CD issue of Tour de France in 1999, but I've never been able to find it. That's not to say it doesn't exist, but if it does, it certainly isn't easy to find. When we come back, we'll look at a couple of long-lost Canadian recordings. Very rare, very precious stuff from the Extras and Bibi Gabor.
You're tuned to the ongoing history of new music. You're tuned to the ongoing history of new music.
The late 70s and early 80s is when Canada really started to get it together when it came to music. Every city across the country had its own vibrant new music scene. The stores were filled with records from hot local acts. Some went on to greater things. Others faded away, their records deleted, and eventually filed away in boxes or milk crates in the basement or the garage. Or worse yet, some of these records were thrown away. All of which is too bad because many of these bands are still fondly remembered by people who patronize these scenes. Some progress has been made in finding, cleaning up, and re-releasing this music on CD. For example, a Toronto label called Other People's Music did a great job of resurrecting indie recordings made by Teenage Head and the Forgotten Rebels and other pioneers of the Canadian punk scene. Other labels have reissued albums and collections by such Canadian new wave stars as The Spoons and Blue Peter and Breeding Ground and the Pucka Orchestra and Images in Vogue. Sadly, though, there are still many gaps in the fossil record of Canadian alternative music, and here are a couple of examples. Gabor Hegedus was born in Hungary in 1948. When the Russian tanks moved through his country in 1956, Gabor's family escaped to England, where he eventually found work trading precious metals at a brokerage house. When he was 23, he moved to Toronto, where he began playing the pub circuit under the name Bibi Gabor. He released 2 albums on the Anthem label, same label as Rush, earning a Juno nomination in the process. And then he moved to BC in the late 1980s, where he produced albums for a variety of acts. However, things went very sour on a personal level, and Bibi died on January 17, 1990. It was a suicide. Now, I would love to be proven wrong on this, but as far as I know, nothing Bibi ever released in the early 80s has ever made it to CD, which is too bad because these 2 albums, a self-titled record from 1980 and Girls of the Future from 1981, were sizable new wave hits in certain parts of Canada. Here is an example of Bibi Gabor. It's a song he wrote based on his memories of being chased out of Hungary by the communists. It's called Soviet Jewelry. B.B. Gabor from 1980. Still not on CD. B.B.'s band in those days was a group from Mississauga called The Extras. In fact, some of the members share songwriting credits with B.B. on that first album. For example, the drummer of The Extras, a guy named Paul Armstrong, helped with the lyrics on Soviet Jewelry. However, the band was fired during the recording sessions for B.B.'s first album. The very next day, though, they were signed up to their own deal on an indie label called Ready Records. Over the next 3 years, there would be 4 albums, but their biggest song was their very first. And you got to kind of put this into perspective, too, because in 1981, no one dared utter the word condom in public. And to write a song about prophylactics and birth control? Career suicide. Didn't seem to bother the Extras, though.
I've got a rubber in my wallet, one of those little whatchamacallits. I'm saving it for that special day when the right girl comes my way. It leaves a circular impression from all those years of compression. I've had it since I turned 13. I got it in a vending machine.
Circular impression, leading to a state of depression. In my wallet, I can't wait to install it. No, I can't wait.
It's in a little tinfoil packet. Sometimes I'm tempted to unwrap it. It's got a reinforced border. I hope it's still in working order. Be prepared, they said in Boy Scouts. I'm waiting for a chance to try it out. I want to try this contraceptive, but all the girls are unreceptive.
Circular impression, leading to a state of depression. In my wallet, I can't wait to install it. No, I can't wait.
I've got a French safe in my pocket. It'll be the nose cone on my rocket. It comes direct from Paris, France. Can't wait to take it from my pants.
Circular impression, leading to a state of depression. In my wallet, I can't wait to install it. No, I can't wait.
The Extras from 1981 with Circular Impression that appears on an album called Bit Parts. And if it's been issued anywhere on CD, I haven't seen it. And by the way, if I can be proven wrong on any of this, please let me know. If you can find any of this stuff on legitimate, commercially available CDs issued by record labels anywhere in the world, tell me and I'll pass it along, because there are thousands of people who would love to own these songs again. I know that this next album was available on CD at one point because I've actually held it in my hands. However, the digital versions of Virgins and Philistines by the Colorfield seems to have completely disappeared, except in Japan, where it was reissued in May of 2002. But unfortunately, it takes a long time to get a copy, and it'll cost you $60 plus shipping. The Colorfield was part of a long family tree descending from Ska King's The Specials. In 1981, frontman Terry Hall took the other singers in the group and formed Fun Boy 3. They lasted for 2 years before Terry bolted and created the Colorfield. Then came a group called Vegas with Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics, followed by, finally, a proper solo career. Retro 80s fans remember the Colorfield fondly for a couple of songs. The first was Can't Get Enough of You Baby, the question mark of the Mysterian song that was later redone by Smash Mouth. The second was this one, Pushin' Up Daisies. Great song, but only available on CD in Japan. Pity.
to a world ago. And groovy sea, frozen souls. You're so rock, you're smoking pot with groovy chicks. The politics of habitats are ultra crap. There's no business like show business, like no business I know. When the curtain falls to no applause, when no one goes to sell out shows, you're pushing up the daisies, pushing up the daisies, pushing up the daisies, pushing up the daisies. And life goes on and 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 on. So much, you've seen it all. If they could see you now, you're lying in beauty now, it's really sad. And the groovy scenes and the denim jeans that were lost and found in the underground have all stopped. Business like show business, like no business I know. You'll never know how close you came from walking down the halls of fame. You'll never know how close you came. You've only got yourself to blame. You're pushing up the daisies, pushing up the daisies, pushing up the daisies, pushing up the daisies. Life goes on and 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 on.
The Color Field with Pushing Up Daisies from late 1984. I have two more vinyl rarities for you before we're done, including one track that will never, ever, ever come out on CD if Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails ever has his way.
You're tuned to the ongoing history of new music. You're tuned to the ongoing history of new music.
Most people are familiar with the four sizes of vinyl. There's the 12-inch LP record, the 12-inch single, the 7-inch single, and old-fashioned 10-inch 78 that was phased out by the mid-1960s. But believe it or not, there are at least two other types of vinyl. Some may remember the long-gone 7-inch single that played at 16 2/3 RPM, half the speed of an LP. Man, they sounded awful. And record collectors will know of the 10-inch single. 10-inch singles were popular for a while in the 80s and 90s. When a band wanted to release a single that would physically stand out, some opted for the unique but awkward 10-inch single. The vinyl archives of the ongoing history contain a surprising number of these things. There's a 10-inch of the Smashing Pumpkins doing I Am One from the Gish album, and bands ranging from the Cowboy Junkies to Concrete Blonde to Blind Melon all released 10-inch singles at one point in their careers. I have two such records right now. The first is from I, Mother Earth. It's a whacked-out remix of One More Astronaut by producer Reese Fulber of Frontline Assembly and Delirium. This was never actually made available for sale to the general public. The jacket is actually stamped with one of those for professional use only things. But check this out. This is a completely different but very cool remix of One More Astronaut that never made it to CD. It's different, huh? I, Mother Earth and the vinyl-only Reese Fulber remix of One More Astronaut. Here's another 10-inch single, this time from Live. Several years ago, they issued this to members of their official fan club. This is a 10-inch piece of two-colored vinyl. Part of it is red, while some blue has been swirled in. The A-side features a remix of a song called Freaks, which originally appeared on their 1997 album Secret Samadhi, while the B-side was a live recording of their cover of a Psychedelic Furs song performed in Toronto in the summer of '97. Like the I, Mother Earth we just heard, this recording was never meant to be sold in stores. But that doesn't mean we can't play it on the radio, right? This is Live, doing the Furs, direct from 10-inch vinyl.
This one's called Love My Way.
Live, recorded in Toronto in 1997. Fan club only, 10-inch vinyl from the Ongoing History Archives. Let us end with this. Before Trent Reznor formed Nine Inch Nails, he was in a series of other bands in and around Cleveland. In the middle 80s, Trent was working as a keyboard salesman in a music store. The job didn't pay very well, so he augmented his income playing keyboards in a band called The Innocents. In 1985, they recorded an indie album entitled Livin' in the Streets for a local outfit called Red Label. Trent isn't really credited with writing any of the songs, but he is listed as the keyboard player, and that is his picture on the front cover. This record has come back to haunt Trent for its sheer awfulness. Rumor has it that once Nine Inch Nails hit it big, Trent dispatched his sister to buy up every single Innocent album she could find, with instructions to destroy them. After you hear this, you'll understand why, given Trent's image as an industrial god. Needless to say, this will never, ever, ever be issued on CD, if Trent has his way. From 1985, some 3 years before Nine Inch Nails appeared, this is Trent with The Innocents and the title track of Livin' in the Street. You can see why Trent Reznor will never let his hard-won reputation be sullied by having that reissued on CD. And can you blame him? Back in a moment.
You're tuned to the ongoing history of new music. You're tuned to the ongoing history of new music.
The deeper you go into the world of vinyl, the more gaps you find when it comes to reissuing old stuff on compact disc. Now, to be fair, there's been a lot of progress, thanks largely to Rhino Records of Los Angeles, who are probably the kings of reissuing old stuff on CD, and also a variety of smaller independent labels across North America and the UK, which are all dedicated to making long-lost vinyl recordings available again. But there is still much to be done. For example, retro fans will know that there are many, many extended remixes from the 1980s that have completely disappeared. Some albums still haven't been transferred to CD, especially from the punk and new wave era. And then there's the vinyl that never made it to the stores, the DJ mixes, the fan club releases, the radio-only releases. All these things are still much sought after. But here's the good news. To keep everyone from going to the internet to download music, the record labels are trying to add value to physical CDs. They're saying, look, if you go to the store and you actually buy the record, we'll give you access to something you can't download. And this is why the concept of DVD audio is so interesting. Besides all the songs, what else can they pack on a disc? There's lots of space for bonus features on DVDs. Maybe some old archival stuff will get our attention. There's more down in the ongoing history archives and that vinyl vault. Well, we'll save those records for another time. Technical production for all this is by Rob Johnston. See you next time. I'm Alan Cross.
You've been listening to The Ongoing History of New Music.
a Deep Sky production.